Antanil Tulian Meldanin, and thank you once again for joining me. My name is Lord Aramil, and today I am joined by a furry friend named Roger. Roger is taking a nap at my feet, but he'll pop up sooner or later, I promise. I am also joined by a far less furry friend, Megara.
Hello.
And today, I'm going to be going through the Player's Handbook, version 3.5, of course. Thank you, Bill. And going through all of the different classes. Not only am I going to talk about what the classes are, what they do, but we're also going to talk about a few entertaining examples of those classes. These aren't necessarily the best version of the classes, but they are at least the most enjoyable that I've come across. Now, before we start, I'd like to give a great big shout out to Teru, who over the past probably month or month and a half, I think I've been doing this. Yeah. He's been doing my troubleshooting for me. So whenever I have a problem with the stream, he's generally the one that I ask what's going on. Because I can't see necessarily what you see, and it's best to have an outside perspective. So, cheers to you, Teru.
Yeet, #1 fan.
Yeah. Now, in the Player's Handbook, we have a dozen classes. We have the Barbarian, the Bard, the Cleric, the Druid, the Fighter, the Monk, the Paladin, Ranger, Rogue, Sorcerer, and Wizard. So that'd be what, 11? Instead of 11. Okay. So I'm going to go through all 11 this week. Unless I need to make up extra time, I will probably keep the extraneous, or the, that's a good word for it, the extra classes from other books, Complete Adventurer, or campaign settings, or what have you. Those will probably be next week, because there's a lot of base classes in D&D 3.5. And honestly, there's a lot that I've never played and have never shown up around this table. So, we'll skip them. Quite simply, it'll just be the ones that I have had some form of interaction with. Not necessarily that I've played, because there are quite a few classes that I haven't played before. But we'll try and get as many interesting ones as possible. So, with that, we begin with everybody's favorite tanky meat shield, the Barbarian. So the Barbarian is a big ball of muscle and rage that swings large heavy things at soft squishy things that scream and bleed. Barbarian is your damage dealer. They are the ones with the most hit points out of basically any class. They are the front line of any strong adventuring party. They are the orc warriors to the human nomads that sail around in longships and smell strongly of mead. But there are also many other entertaining forms of Barbarian. And I'm going to talk about two which somewhat defy the stereotypes, because those are always the funniest to me. The first is probably the first time a Barbarian was ever played around the table was Quindar Blooddrinker. Yes, a very vicious Barbarian. If memory serves, Quindar had a whole arsenal of different weapons, which he named. I want to say he had at least a great sword and a great axe, and I think a short bow. and I want to say that the Great Axe was named Elizabeth.
Okay.
Quindar was also all of 3 feet tall. He was a gnome.
Sweet Jesus Christ.
Yes. Quindar was the Gnome Barbarian. Played by Ren in my father's campaign. Now, Quindar wasn't obviously the most optimized barbarian, but for a lot of us, this was our first time playing D&D, like, for any real amount of time. So, things that are pretty normal to more experienced D&D players was completely foreign to us. Though we really enjoyed the idea of playing against type even then. I was playing against type in a way, and I'll get to that when we hit Cleric. But Quindar was just interesting. Now, we had never experienced the feat Cleave before Quindar. So the idea of getting a second attack after dropping an enemy already, now that was some fun stuff. That's something that we wanted to get our hands on, and really, we were quite tickled by Quindar's abilities. As a matter of fact, the word cleave was said so often that it became kind of an inside joke. After the campaign ended, there were jokes that Quindar just kept cleaving. Bless you. Gesundheit.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Quindar cleaved through time and space, targeting a different atom of oxygen with each swing, so he could just keep cleaving. There were jokes that Io, the great dragon god of the multi-universe, the one who just kind of sets order to all things and, creates crystal spheres, would just be there in his cosmic everythingness, just in his study, meditating or whatever. Cleave! What? So, it was a bit of a joke that Quindar cleaving around was like a fly buzzing in Io's ear. And every so often, Quindar would make an appearance just randomly cleaving through nothingness, just in and out through portals of pure cleaving energy, as he would cleave through the borders between realities. Some Dr. Pepper. Okay. But the second barbarian, if that was the first barbarian I ever saw, this is the most recent. There is a barbarian in my Monday campaign named Varda. And Varda really entertains me. She is a halfling barbarian with a pet dinosaur. I forget what kind of dinosaur, but it's basically a feathered pterodactyl. Yes. So, her weapons include the traditional Eberron halfling barbarian weapons, because halfling barbarians are completely a thing in Eberron.
Mm-hmm. So 2.5 feet tall.
Oh, yeah.
Barbarians.
But they ride dinosaurs.
Correct.
So one of the quotes about them was that if you are going to judge me by my height, judge me by my height in the saddle. Just like, all right. So let's see here. Are you on the phone?
It's a scam. I was waiting for them to like start saying things.
Okay. But she has the at least two of the three traditional halfling weapons. She's got the Tangat and the Sharesh, which is basically she's got like a scythe and a scimitar, which is cool. The third traditional halfling weapon is the boomerang, which, while it is good for jokes, is not a great ranged weapon. So I'm not upset about her not having that. It's unfortunately just not very effective, in my own personal opinion. Now, the third thing which she recently got was a lance. And boy, just a lance on a pterodactyl riding halfling is something truly spectacular to watch. Just dive attacks all over the place, and it was very entertaining to watch the first session she got it. And recently, they've entered into the Dragon Mech world that I was talking about last week. So here they are in a land of mechs, and wouldn't you know it, she just got it's basically a big cylinder. It's called a Rust Monster Wand. But it's not an actual magic wand. It's more like, imagine a large cylinder, okay, with a cap on one end. And inside the cylinder are 2 to 3 baby rust monsters, about an inch long. And you open up the cap on one end, and there's kind of like a screen or something, so they can't get out, but they can, like, take their little feelers and brush up against metal objects. And normally this is great for just, I don't know, fucking up with people's gear or what have you. But it's also really great for flying on top of a mech, dropping onto, like, the porthole or whatever, and feed my children, feed to the lock. And just rusting through the lock, and then you're dropping into a cockpit, being a 2-foot tall ball of rage and blade against some poor mech pilot who has no idea what's about to happen. It's a bit like if you took a very angry badger, shook it a little bit, and then tossed it into a cramped race car. So that's my that's my bit on barbarians. They can be really funny, especially if played well. I really enjoy them. Every party needs to have a front line, and a barbarian, I feel, is a more interesting version of a front line than a lot of alternatives. Moving on, though, we have the Bard. Now, Bards, what's the best way to put it?
Bard. Just a bard.
Yeah, right. They're performers.
Toss a coin to your witcher, O valley of plenty.
Him, he's a bard.
Yeah, bard.
Yeah. And bards create music through performance. Usually this is either singing or playing an instrument, but it doesn't have to be, technically. Any perform skill can be used. So, interpretive dance, totally fine. Roger. Okay, fine. Roger.
But that's why she didn't want to come up.
Roger, do you want to come say hi to the internet? Come here.
Go say hi to the internet.
Come here.
Come here.
Come here, Roger. No. Oh. Come here. Come here. Oh, that's a good boy. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's a good boy, Roger. Yes. Perfect. Yeah.
Yep.
Are you just charging her phone?
Here we go.
So, bards, yes, they perform, and from their performance comes magic. They're not quite as good as they are in 5th edition, but they are a very solid support class. They get a bit of spellcasting, which is good. By and large, they're very passive in some respects. A couple of the bards that I have seen played, or the very few bards I should say, that I've seen played, either have a single level in bard to just kind of help a little bit, or they're kind of background characters during combat at least. And, it's helpful. One way or another. Just, hey, you know what? A +1 to hit and damage doesn't sound like a lot, but it adds up. It's what it gets to.
Correct.
Another healing spell a day is another healing spell that the Cleric doesn't have to use.
Or
Fine.
the Druid.
Or the Druid. Yes. We'll get to your character soon enough.
Oh.
But sometimes the bard can be what's a good term? Chaos. Back to the campaign with Quindar, there was another gnome. This gnome's name was Daisy.
Oh no.
Daisy was a gnome bard of chaos. Yes, just chaos and whimsy were the order of the day when it came to Daisy. Because in that campaign, we were exploring a dungeon. The dungeon. Have to give it the proper oomph, because we never finished exploring the dungeon in 6 years, so... part of that is because we were very cautious. We took things, one room at a time, being pretty careful. And we didn't suffer any mortality in 6 years, so I'd say it paid off, at least in our character's eyes. Regardless, Daisy was not cautious, nor particularly careful. Daisy was impetuous. Daisy, at one point, slathered herself down in soap? Was it? Yeah. Just so that she couldn't be caught and, and not by, an enemy. No, she was escaping from the party, who at this point was just, trying to almost keep her on a literal leash. Because she'd just run through the hallways and just smash into traps or what have you. And as a 1st or 2nd level party, that's pretty dangerous. This dungeon was not leveled for any particular group. The dungeon just was. And if you stumbled into an area that was too dangerous for you, well, that's too bad. So, it was a very bad place for Daisy, but a very entertaining place for the player.
Drop some names. I want to put them on blast. Tell me who it was.
No, I'm only using pseudonyms for this, and that player wasn't. Well, I guess he was in DAG for a day and used the DAG name Nerevar, but
Okay.
yeah.
Either way.
Yeah, Nerevar also played another character later after Daisy got bored because we kept stopping her from being suicidal. And he almost died too, so, it's just...
It's fine. Everything's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. Anyways, that's all I have to say on bards.
That's the general feeling on bards. This is fine.
Yeah, right.
It's fine.
Funny enough, I've never had a horny bard around the table, which is probably for the best, because there is a trope about bards just seducing everything that moves, but I've never had to really deal with that. I don't know. Maybe it's not as common as the internet might make you think, or maybe it's just the group of people.
I was gonna say, maybe you just hang around good people.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Okay, maybe not.
Moving on, we have clerics. So cleric is a priest. It is a direct emissary of a deity, or in certain cases, a pantheon. They are the people running the temples. They are the ones who smite the undead, heal the wounded, cure the diseases. Proclaim the message of their deity, yeah. And all of what I just said is, for the healing the sick and whatnot, that's for good clerics. There are also evil clerics and neutral clerics who may or may not heal the sick, or they might cause the sick. Just saying. So, what is the cleric? Beyond... Well, they are I call them second or third line fighters, first and foremost. They can wear heavier armor. They can wield pretty decent gear. So if you play it the way that I have in the past, you can make a pretty damn good war priest. Yeah. Alternatively, you can be a soft, squishy spellcaster. This is fine too. Whatever your deity would prefer, really, is what it comes down to. When I played a cleric, and this is when I played against type, but it was kind of against my own type, personal, I played a dwarf cleric named Vite. And this was originally just kind of a joke. It was like, ah ha ha ha, Aramil playing a dwarf. That's funny. And then that campaign lasted for 6 years. And, yeah,
Regrets.
no regrets. But, because Vite was an absolute badass, and I loved him. So, he was a war priest of Clangadin Silveraxe. Is it Silveraxe? Silverbeard? One of the two.
Sure.
Either his axes or his beard or both were silver. Yeah. He was kind of the, in some ways, he was party leader. In other ways, he was very much not. He was the most experienced of all of the characters by the end. Because I had Vite, and I just kept playing Vite, while other people would, start with one character, kind of get bored, set that character aside. The character went off and retired, or what have you. And came in with a new character. So I think I was level 7 when we ended. Which was the most experienced out of anyone after 6 years. So that lets you know how much XP we got. Which a good boy.
He's learning about clerics.
Yes. That makes I'm happy puppy. Happy puppy.
50-pound lapdog, y'all.
I'm kind of concerned. Now then. Let's see. So.
You don't get to move now.
Oh, no. Stay.
You are precariously perched.
Oh, wait. Clerics form basically one half of the divine spellcasting. So, magic can be separated into two major branches. There's the arcane and the divine.
Technically, you could also add in psionics, but that's not in the player's handbook, so we're going to ignore it. So, divine casters are like clerics, whereas arcane is more like wizards or bards, actually, to use a class we've already talked about. The other side of the divine are the druids.
Yeet.
She's happy because she's playing a druid, and I'm probably going to talk about that druid because it's a very entertaining build. Druids are basically clerics, but instead of a individual deity, they're like, I worship nature. Just the power of nature itself gives these people magical abilities. That's awesome. If I were any class IRL, I would probably like to be a druid. The sorcerer would be pretty dope as well. Either way, druids are, well, they tend to have an animal companion, which is fun. Let's see, they, at higher levels, can turn into animals,
Mm-hmm.
which is also fun. They get a good amount of spell casting, pretty good hit points. The only thing that makes them slightly worse in combat than, say, a cleric is the fact that they can't wear metal armor. So, unless you are higher level, in which case none of that matters, anyways, or if you have, say, access to exotic materials like dragon scale. Dragon scale's not metal. You can make a suit of dragon mail armor, technically. Yeah, ironwood, bronze wood, depending on your campaign setting. There are alternatives, but they are almost always significantly more expensive. So,
Or you could just be badass and not need armor.
well, I guess there's that. Oh, but to give a fun example, I'm going to give two examples. One really quick. So, back to the dungeon. One of Ashnara's first characters was a druid. Now, there's nothing innately wrong about a druid, but a druid in a dungeon is at a slight disadvantage. This was a dungeon with basically no vegetation, no place for a druid to do druidry. There weren't a bunch of animals running around. It was basically just kind of a shittier version of the cleric I was playing. Actually, I remember one time we found there was a hallway where there was a bunch of water or something, and he was really excited because there were some fungi just growing, and he was so ecstatic about just vegetation.
It's not vegetation. It's
Well, yeah, but
fungus.
all right, but it's something growing.
Yeah, it's biotic.
Yeah, it's something alive and growing that's not trying to nom your face.
Correct.
Right.
And the only wood in there was something you could work with, not really do much with.
Yeah, this is just all the wood was indoors. So so that character got retired pretty quickly. But another druid, one that Megara is currently playing here, Euphemia.
Excuse me, that's a euphemia.
Euphemia, excuse me. But also mainly just called Euphy.
a halfling druid who rides upon her mighty war goat, Satan, a pitch black goat. With, do you remember what your animal companion's name actually is?
My viper?
Yeah.
Charlie!
Oh, is it Charlie? Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Yeah, so, and a small viper named Charlie that just kind of twines around her arm. In a interesting way of bringing nature with her, she's got it's a caper cloak. Do you
It's
know?
a wisp cloak.
Cloak. Okay, yeah, a wisp cloak. Which basically is a heavy cloak with a bunch of pockets, and in those pockets are a bit of dirt, and in the dirt grows ivy, basically. And, I mean, it's mainly for, like, it's supposed to be, like, camouflage, so a bit like a ghillie suit, like a living ghillie suit, basically.
Because I'm a druid.
Because Druid, it's just like empty a pouch into your hand, toss it, and cast Entangle, and suddenly vines just explode out and just wrap some bitches up.
Or they feed my goat.
Or feed you goat, yeah, right.
Hey, 2 birds, 1
Both,
stone.
both is good.
Both is good.
So that's Druids. Next up are fighters. Fighters are boring. Sorry, fighters are basic. I mean, fighters are useful. Yes.
Yes.
Look, if you're looking to start out your first character, the most basic thing you can be is a human fighter. It's simple, it helps you get the mechanics down, it's fine, and it can be fun. I need to stress that. You can have a very good, very well motivated, very roleplay intensive, even, character that is a human fighter. I again have 2 examples. One of which is, once again, from the dungeon. Because we had a shitload of people in that dungeon. So, but the baseline of a fighter is that they fight. They are one of the few classes, I think, that can use tower shields, if memory serves. Yeah. Yeah, they get the ability to use tower shields just right off Jump Street. They are proficient with all simple and martial weapons, with all armor, heavy, medium, light, whatever. They're the people who are decked out in full plate with maybe a big-ass sword, maybe a sword and shield, axes, bows, whatever. They can do it, and they are very versatile. You can play 2 human fighters who are nothing alike. And that's good, honestly. You can have a dexterity build fighter who is a ranged specialist. And by, like, 5th level, easily, they'll be outgunning any 5th level ranger. There's another class we will talk about soon enough, don't worry. But that's R, and we're at F still. I'm running out of Dr. Pepper, and that makes me sad. Okay. What also makes me sad is that chat is dead. And I'm not certain why. Usually I have, like, 4 or 5 people. That's very odd. I wonder if... I'm going to try and do something, and if it doesn't work, I'll be miffed and yet not terribly surprised. And if it... Okay. Copy
least. Maybe that'll work. That might work. Sorry, I am still learning how to do all of this, kind of as I go along. I keep meaning to figure out some of the different things. Like, one of the things I want to do is figure out not just title cards, but how to instant premieres, I think is what they're called. I'll get it figured out eventually, I'm sure. Anyways, fighters. Yes. The front line of any party. Even if you have a barbarian, you can always use a fighter. If a barbarian is DPS, so high damage, then the fighter is the tank. If you already have a solid front line, then the fighter can be an archer. Solid. Just buff up dexterity instead of strength, or both of those instead of like constitution or something. You get good hit points. D10, I want to say. Yeah. Fighters get a D10 hit points instead of a barbarian's D12, but at the same time, it's pretty good either way. You're going to have more hit points than almost every other person in the party. Which, if there isn't a barbarian, that makes you the designated trap set offer. If your rogue is MIA or inoperable. But a few entertaining, what's a good term? Examples for fighters. Now, let's see. In my first Eberron campaign, we had Makoto. Now, Makoto was played by Rin, so the same person who made Quindar. Now, Makoto, she was interesting. She was I want to say, human fighter who specialized in a scythe and the cleave tree. She was a reaper of souls by the end of that campaign. A clan of kobolds worshipped her as a death goddess. Completely by accident, because somewhere in there they go to this like pirate city, okay? And just wandering around, Makoto is off more or less by herself, and she gets, well, to say she gets mugged is kind of inaccurate. There's an attempted mugging by Yip Yip the Kobold. Now, I don't remember exactly why a couple kobolds decided to try and mug this human, but they did. And needless to say, it didn't go well for the kobolds. But it didn't end there. Because, that they're in this pirate city, then they go off to adventure, and then they come back later in the campaign, and she is accosted by Yap Yap, son of Yip Yip, who tries in vain to avenge his father. And I think later in the campaign, so even later, she runs into Yip Yap, son of Yap Yap, son of Yip Yip, who ends up meeting his sires far sooner than he anticipated.
So she cleaves through 3 generations of a kobold family tree, and ever after, the kobolds of that city, and I think one other city nearby, kind of view her as this minor avatar of the death god. Just pure joy right there. The other fighter was played by a mentor figure of mine, Zakel. Now, Zakel made another human fighter named Zakel. Whatever, that's fine. Makes it easy, I guess. And Zakel, the fighter, he liked to play around with mundane alternatives to magic. By the end of his time in the campaign, he had a decently working flamethrower going. And that was his big accomplishment, was he called it fighter magic. Just basically magic that anyone could use, i.e. technology. So it was very interesting. He was very much a more intellectually based fighter, which is something you don't often see. Is a fighter and intelligence is generally pretty separate. But moving on to our next class, we have the monk. Monks are fun because they are basically every kung fu movie stereotype wrapped up into a nice, not quite racist package. And I do enjoy monks. I need to put this out there. It's like, monks are fun. They are... I want to call them useful, but they don't quite hold the front line as good as, say, a fighter or barbarian. But they're not bad, that's for sure. Okay? They can get in some trouble, though. Specifically, I'm going to talk about Juno the monk. Now, a couple good things about monks is they get unarmed strike, so punching, kicking, headbutting, elbows, whatever. You're never disarmed. That's cool. That's good. They are proficient with a shitload of really, well, out there weapons. Oriental weapons. Asian weapons. Basically, any Asian weapon that is in the player's handbook or in a lot of the supplements, they have proficiency with. That's cool. So it gives you a lot of variation, a good differentiation from other more martial character types. Let's see. They have things like evasion, which allows them to... what was it? That's save for... Yeah, if you make a successful saving throw against an attack that deals half damage on a successful saving throw, like a fireball, then they save for all the damage, which is nice, because a lot of your frontline combatants might not have a great reflex save. They're mobile, is what it really comes down to. Is they are a really mobile fighting force that I would say is best when used in conjunction with a fighter. If you have a monk who's just springing past the enemy to turn around then and flank from the other side, you're going to do much better. So a monk in conjunction with the rest of the party, like
basically any other class will do well. Now, Juno the Monk was, again, played by Nervar, Daisy's creator. So you can already guess that this is going to go sideways. Now, Juno was a little bit less impetuous, a little less chaotic, which is good. The Nervar had kind of learned his lesson and was like, okay, this isn't the party for this kind of chaos. Whatever, fine. I'll play a more subdued character. Juno was still cool, mind you. He wore, like, cloth wrappings, like, all over the place, because he had been, like, terribly burnt as a child or something like that. And it's just like, okay. A little bit creepy, but, you know, roleplay. We were in a temple in this dungeon. And I don't know if any of my viewers will remember the AD&D book, Player's Handbook. The cover of that is a massive stone statue with glowing red eyes. And those eyes are actually like rubies or some other massive gem, like the size of, you know, your hand gem. Okay. Well, we came across a massive statue sitting on a, basically, throne. And I want to say that he had gems kind of in a circlet around the head. Now, at this point, Nervar was about to move, I believe. So this was like the last to second to last time he would be able to play. So he looks up at this statue, which is just screaming, if you steal from this, you are dead. And it's like, I want one of those gems. So what does he do? He climbs up the statue. He climbs up like this 2 or 3 story statue. Gets up there to gems. Again, they're like as big as your palm at least. And just takes out a dagger and hacks away at the edge of this gem until it pops out. And then what happens? Well, the gods decide that he is an annoying bug, and they're just going to zap him. He gets hit by like 4 lightning bolts. That just come down from the ceiling, and he falls at like -8. Because again, we're like 2nd or 3rd level characters. And it basically took all of my healing spells as I just dive and catch him to just keep him from dying outright. And I actually succeeded on a heal check to remove the gem from his palm because it had almost melted into it, which is absolutely nasty. But Juno retired with a hefty gemstone. Now, we are at 12:50 already, and we're like halfway. Well,
I guess you have to do a part 2.
I guess I will have to do a part 2. Alright, we'll do one more, because Paladin is really simple and easy. And I say they're simple and easy because I don't think there's ever been a Paladin in any of my campaigns. Yeah, Paladins tend to get a pretty bad rap. They are the Crusaders. They are the holy warriors of deities. They are the martial counterpart to Clerics. You want to play a Knight of the Round Table, you're playing a Paladin. And unfortunately, a lot of people like to play Paladins as kind of a stick in the mud. And yeah, to an extent, stick in the mud. They have to be lawful and they have to be good.
but a lot of people tend to play the lawful more than the good. And it can get kind of rough. But be that as it may, a paladin is a holy warrior first and foremost. So sometimes it's just best to accept that if the rogue is doing ultimately the right thing, maybe you can just look away and drink your mead and not have to know how the rogue snuck inside the castle and opened up the doors to the big bad's lair. And you can just quietly ignore a few of the unconscious guards are no longer, wielding or wearing their coin purses. It's fine. It's fine.
It's fine.
It's fine. Everything's fine. I don't have much of a problem with paladins, but I do tend to suggest that people not play them if I feel like they might play them like sticks in the mud. But a paladin can be really helpful for a adventuring party. They are pretty solid frontline unit. They get a special mount, so they are almost automatically heavy cavalry. They also get the ability to lay on hands, which, besides being a hilarious innuendo, is just this healing ability. Yes, and now I feel better. But yeah, they can just heal X many hit points a day. And at higher levels, they get spells, so cool. And it's really kind of a shame that nobody ever plays them well, I feel. But that's where we're going to leave off today, I guess. So, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Leave a like and a comment down below. What's your favorite class? If it's one that I've already talked about, or one that I'll talk about next week, hell yeah. If it's some extra one from an accessory or whatnot, I'll try to include that also. So, and some of you might have noticed my t-shirt. I got my Ragnarok 2020 t-shirt. Yes.
The rag that never was.
Right. So, it is both tear-jerking and awesome that I got it. I'm very happy. I was afraid I wouldn't get a rag t-shirt this year, and that could not stand. So, I hope you enjoyed. Like I said, leave a like and comment down below. Subscribe, hit that bell button. And until we meet again, dear friends, Untitled Chapter, and farewell.